Well, good day everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Typewriter Video Series. This is Joe Van Cleve. Hey, sometimes when you get a new typewriter in your collection and you think things are working, all of a sudden something happens. And you might have to deal with this at one time or another. I was typing up a little note for somebody, and just as I finished writing the note, finished the last sentence, I heard this whirring noise, the unmistakable sound of a broken drawband and the spring motor unwinding itself. Oh darn. Well, the typewriter in question is, of course, this 1930 Underwood Portable, and this is the drawband in question. I remember telling myself, after I initially got this machine and cleaned it up, I remember looking at this strap and saying to myself, you know, that strap looks like it's pretty worn. That cloth it was built and made in 1930, and so what is that, 80 something years old? So I was kind of thinking about that weeks ago before it decided to give up the ghost. So when I heard the sound of the spring motor rapidly unwinding itself, I went and looked in there, and so the spring motor is this pulley-looking device on the left side behind the left ribbon spool along the underneath side of the track where the carriage runs. This is a cloth band about approximately 1/4 of an inch wide. It's kind of army green color. It has 4 rows of stitching on it, and both ends of the band were looped around the special little bracket, and it was glued and stitched, I believe. And what happened to this drawband, so you can see the other end of it is right here, and what happened was in the middle they separated due to age. It just gave up the ghost, and due to wear or whatever, it is broken. So this is the left side of the platen, and you can see down in there, this is the spring-loaded spring motor. And you can see that I no longer have a flat strap. I have a thin insulated wire as a replacement. And this is underneath the right side of the carriage. And you can see that I've replaced the strap with this wire. This is the special little fixture that the bracket on the end of each end of that strap. It is wide enough on this flat end for that 1/4 inch approximately wide strap to go through. Then on this end, there's a small nut that you loosen, you take off, and this bracket is able to slip out of the nut on the little post. But let's talk about how I replaced this and why I chose to use a little piece of wire. My concern with replacing the original strap with some flat cloth-like material like a shoelace, for instance, was the way that the original strap has a loop built into here on the end, is they've actually stitched it. If I can turn it around, you might be able to see there's actually some stitching. 2 rows of stitching here and here, and it looks like that stitching was pretty darn secure because obviously it broke here. This loop never gave up. But my concern was, okay, I could get a shoelace and I could probably make a replacement strap, but again, I was really uncertain about how best to make this loop here on the end because I don't have an industrial sewing machine. I didn't have any confidence in being able to sew it by hand. And there's a possibility, of course, of gluing it, applying different kinds of adhesives. But so my thinking always tends to err on the side of, well, whatever past experience I have, I'm going to use that instead. So first of all, before I replaced this strap, I had to know how long it was. And so what I did is I measured the length from where the loop is on the end, which is the base of that rectangular little metal bracket, from that end to the other end, and kind of presuming how the broken fibers went together here, but it measured very close to 12 inches. It was sort of like 11 7/8 inches, so pretty close to 12 inches on my measuring system. So my biggest issue then, knowing the length of it was approximately 12 inches, maybe just slightly less, was what was I going to replace that 1/4 inch wide cloth strap with? Well, I thought about something like a shoelace, but I was really uncertain about how to attach the ends, how to make a reliable loop other than tying a knot in it, which kind of sounded kind of primitive. And so what I decided was I tend to always fall back on things that I'm familiar with, and I'm familiar with using wire and using a soldering iron. So I have this hookup wire. This is 26 gauge stranded insulated hookup wire. So very thin, very flexible. It's multi-strand wire. I think it's like maybe aluminum or something. It doesn't look copper colored, but it may be plated, copper plated, aluminum plated copper, who knows. Anyway, really thin wire and very flexible and quite strong. And so the thing is, to attach this wire to those little metal rectangular connector loops, you have to first strip the wire and twist it in the direction that it normally twists inside there. And then you have to take your soldering iron and tin the end of the wire, tin the exposed end, which is basically coating it in melted solder. And then once it's tinned, you're going to make a loop like that and put that loop in through the connector loop and get it all set down, squeeze down, and then take your soldering iron and solder it. And make a nice little bead of solder right on the tip there to close up that loop. And make sure you have enough solder so it'll hold, but not too much. And then as far as gauging the length of it, you want where this solder loop connects to the connector, you want that distance to the other point on the other side of the connector to be the length that you measured, which in my case was just under 12 inches. And so that's how I did it. It was pretty easy to do. And again, this stuff is really flexible, and it looks like it's going to work good and wrap around that drum okay. It certainly works right now. If I do have any issues down the road with either the solder connection coming loose, I can certainly resolder it. I might even want to do kind of a telegraph hitch, do a little bit of wrapping of the wire around itself before I solder it. And if worse comes to worse, of course, I could always find a different material. But I was really a lot more confident about my ability to make a nice little solder connection and have it hold reliably than I was about tying a fishing knot in some fishing line or some kind of a knot in a shoelace, or putting glue on a shoelace and expecting it to hold. Well, the answer to how you install it in the typewriter is that there is a gap running underneath the platen carriage near the rails where the bearings are, that you can run like a wooden chopstick all the way through from the top of the spring motor pulley all the way over to the right. And since you can run it all the way over there, that means you can tape one end of that connector onto the chopstick, and you can thread it all the way through the machine, and then where it comes out on the bottom underneath the right end of the platen, you can attach it right here. And then on the other side, of course, is the spring motor, the drum of the spring motor, where you have to attach it there. And so once the other end of my new strap was connected to underneath the carriage, and the free end was sticking out loose here from underneath the carriage, then I began to wind the drum up, the spring up by hand with my fingers, winding it up right here and getting the proper tension. And as you wind it at a certain point along the drum, you'll see the little hook where that metal bracket is supposed to attach to. And you just have to decide how much tension you want. There's probably a preset setting, and if you have the original manufacturer's manual, service manual, it'll tell you how many revolutions to wind it up. But I just did it by trial and error. My first initial try was not enough tension, and I gave it 2 or 3 more turns, and basically hooked the hook right there, and then gently released it and let it take up tension, and the thing has been working fine ever since. And I have typed a test paragraph, and it types quite nicely. and there's no skipping or any problems with the type alignment or hanging up or anything. I have a few typographical errors, of course, but spelling errors. But no, it works really good, just like it did before. If anything, I believe I probably don't have the spring motor tense enough, quite the same as it was before, because the carriage return is a little bit easier to do, I noticed. And that may or may not present itself as a problem down the road. If that is a problem, I can simply unhook the wire connector and tighten up the drum another turn or two. But right now, because it's not skipping or not piling up letters, and it seems to work fine, I kind of like the really easy throw of the carriage return. It's not nearly as hard as it was, and so I'm pretty pleased with this repair. So it may very well turn out that I might have to end up replacing my little wire, hookup wire drawstring with something different. But for now, I'm okay with how I've done this repair, because it's an easy connection to make. Soldering that loop of wire back on itself around the little fitting on the end of the drawstring, that seems to be an easy method, and as long as the solder holds, it's going to be a nice, strong connection. I'm a lot more certain about doing it this way than I would be about hand stitching a cloth strip like a shoestring, or, I mean, I suppose you could just tie a knot in a shoestring, but I'm not really sure about that either. I don't know if it would make a little bump as the drum turns and make a little interruption or some kind of discontinuity in the way that the motion of the carriage is. So we'll see. It's an experimental thing, but it was really easy to do. This was my first drawstring that I've ever done, reverse drawstring replacement, and it was much easier than I thought. I have removed the drawstring on a Hermes 3000, at least the right side connection, but this was super easy, and knowing the length of it, being able to measure it from the remnants of the old drawstring, getting the right length really helped. And so the only unknown was really just the tension of it, and it's just experimental. But as I said earlier, I'm really kind of pleased with the tension I have right now. It works fine. And so that's it. If you have any issues with a broken drawstring, don't think life is over. Don't think that the typewriter is busted for good. Hey, there's ways of working around it, but get yourself a long, like a wooden skewer, chopstick kind of thing that you can run through the carriage where the drawstring runs, and you can use it to thread that replacement drawstring, or in my case, wire, through there. Some people like to use high tension fishing line. I didn't have any of that, and I was more confident about my ability to solder a loop on the end of the wire than I was about tying some kind of a fancy fishing knot and then gluing it and hoping it doesn't slip. So, hey, I fixed my Underwood typewriter, and it's good to go for another round of writing. And hey, by the way, one of the things I'm going to be writing on this typewriter this week is I'm going to be writing my story for typing assignment number 5, which is to write about a notable person in your life. I hope you guys participate in that writing exercise, and we look forward to seeing your submission. Until next time, this is Joe Van Cleve, and you have yourselves a great day.